What if I told you that the secrets of time travel are not just the stuff of science fiction, but might actually be hidden within the pages of history itself? We've all wondered about the possibility of moving through time, whether out of nostalgia, longing, or sheer curiosity about what lies ahead. But what if there were people who claimed not only to have imagined it, but to have lived it? Today, we're embarking on a journey into one of history's most tantalizing mysteries, the secret of time travel claims and the astonishing stories that suggest someone, somewhere, might have discovered the key to bending time itself. From ancient manuscripts filled with cryptic prophecies to modern-day accounts that defy all logical explanation, the idea of temporal displacement has haunted humanity's imagination for centuries. It's a topic that blurs the line between myth and reality, inviting us to question everything we think we know about time, memory, and the very fabric of existence. What drives this timeless fascination? Perhaps it's the universal human desire to revisit our past or reshape our future, to correct a mistake, relive a moment of joy, or simply bear witness to history as it unfolded. These aren't just abstract dreams, they're deeply emotional, profoundly human longings that resonate with every one of us. In this video, we'll explore some of the most compelling and little-known historical accounts that hint at the possibility of real-time travel. You'll hear about enigmatic figures who appeared to possess knowledge far ahead of their time, strange artifacts that seem out of place in their eras, and first-hand testimonies that continue to puzzle historians and scientists alike. This isn't about far-fetched theories or wild speculation. It's about documented events and persistent rumors that challenge our understanding of reality. So settle in, open your mind, and join me as we step into the shadows of history to uncover evidence that might just change the way you see time forever. Our journey into these mysteries begins with one of the most astonishing and widely debated accounts, the baffling case of Rudolph Fentz. Picture the bustling energy of Times Square in the spring of 1950. The streets are filled with the sounds of honking cars and the glow of neon signs, a whirlwind of post-war modernity. Suddenly, amidst the crowd, a man appears who seems utterly lost, not just in the city, but in time itself. He's dressed in a fine, old-fashioned frock coat and trousers, his hair styled in a way that hadn't been fashionable for decades. Witnesses described him as disoriented and confused, as if he'd just stepped out of a different world entirely. The situation reached its tragic climax when he allegedly stepped into the path of a taxi and was killed instantly. The mystery, however, had only just begun. When police officers searched the man, they found items that made no sense for the era. His identification cards bore a name, Rudolph Fentz. The money in his pockets was old, very old coins and banknotes that hadn't been in circulation since the previous century. Most perplexing of all was a receipt for the care of a horse and carriage, dated 1876, from a livery stable that had long since vanished from the city. The police, following the only lead they had, attempted to locate an address for Rudolph Fentz. Their investigation led them to a Mrs. Fentz who was utterly bewildered. She confirmed that a Rudolph Fentz had indeed been her husband's father, but there was a catastrophic problem with that information. Her father-in-law had vanished without a trace back in 1876, a young man in his prime, and had never been seen again. This story, so cinematic in its details, presents us with a profound and unsettling question. How could a man reported missing 74 years earlier suddenly reappear, not having aged a single day, only to die moments after his arrival? It's a narrative that feels ripped straight from the pages of a science fiction novel, yet it's presented as a factual case from the files of the New York Police Department. The implication is as terrifying as it is fascinating, that Rudolph Fentz somehow slipped through a crack in time, experiencing a journey that lasted an instant for him but spanned generations for the rest of the world. He stepped out of 1876 and directly into the roaring chaos of 1950s New York, a temporal pilgrim who reached his destination only to meet an immediate and fatal end. The investigation into Rudolph Fentz's death only magnified the strangeness of the entire event. Police found his personal effects to be a collection of historical artifacts, perfectly preserved yet utterly anachronistic. Beyond the old-fashioned currency, they discovered a handful of coins that were no longer minted, a letter addressed to him with a postmark from 1876, and perhaps most strikingly, that receipt for the care of a horse and carriage from a stable on Lexington Avenue, a business that city records confirmed had not operated for over half a century. None of these items showed any sign of the wear and tear you would expect from objects that were 75 years old. They looked as if they had been brand new just the day before. Detectives working the case were reportedly baffled, treating it with a seriousness that suggests they believed it was a genuine, if inexplicable, police matter. Their attempt to notify the next of kin led them to the last known address associated with the name Fentz, where they met the elderly widow. Her reaction was not one of grief for a man she had never met, but one of pure, unadulterated shock. She explained that her husband's father, Rudolph Fentz, had indeed disappeared one evening in 1876 after going out for a walk. He was a young man, just 31 years old, and he simply never returned home. The case had remained open but cold for decades, a family mystery that was suddenly and terrifyingly resolved 3 generations later. This incredible story, first published in a 1951 issue of the science fiction magazine, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, was presented not as fiction but as a retelling of a true account from the NYPD's files. For years, it was cited as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a real, documented time slip. The details were so specific, the chain of evidence so logical, that it captivated researchers and enthusiasts. However, the enduring power of the Rudolph Fentz tale lies not in its veracity, but in its perfect construction as a modern myth. Investigative journalists and skeptics have since thoroughly debunked the story. No record of such a case exists in New York Police Department archives, and no contemporary news reports from 1950 mention a bizarre death of this nature in Times Square. The story's true origin appears to be a short story written by Jack Finney, the same author who later wrote the classic time travel novel Time and Again. Yet, even when stripped of its claim to factual truth, the narrative holds a profound grip on our collective imagination. It perfectly encapsulates the most haunting aspects of a time travel fantasy: the visceral disorientation, the tragic irony of a life instantly transported, and the terrifying fragility of our place in the timeline. The reason the Fentz story persists, circulating in books and online forums as alleged fact, is because it feels true on a deeper, emotional level. It speaks to a universal anxiety about being out of step with the world, of becoming a relic in your own life. This transition from a purported police case to a recognized urban legend is, in many ways, even more fascinating. It demonstrates our powerful need to believe that such wonders and terrors are possible, that the rigid flow of time might not be as immutable as science tells us. The story's journey from fiction to claimed fact reveals less about the mechanics of time and more about the human heart's timeless desire for mystery. But if the case of Rudolph Fentz serves as a cautionary tale about how easily fiction can be embraced as fact, our next story presents us with a far more intricate and enduring puzzle, one that comes not from a police blotter but from the detailed, first-hand accounts of 2 highly respected and credible women. In the summer of 1901, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Elena Jourdain, the principal and vice principal of a prestigious Oxford college, decided to spend a holiday in France. Their visit to the Palace of Versailles would become the cornerstone of one of the most famous and hotly debated time-slip accounts in history, an event so vivid and unsettling that it would consume the rest of their lives. On a warm August day, the 2 women set out to explore the expansive grounds of the palace. Their destination was the Petit Trianon, the small, elegant chateau gifted to Marie Antoinette. As they walked along the intended path, both women later reported a sudden and profound change in the atmosphere. The cheerful, sun-drenched day seemed to grow heavy and oppressively still. The landscape itself appeared to shift, with the familiar landmarks vanishing and the trees taking on a strange, almost artificial appearance like painted scenery. It was in this eerie silence that they began to encounter people. A woman abruptly shook a white cloth out of a window at them. Two men dressed in long, greenish coats and three-cornered hats pointed them down a path, their attire and demeanor completely out of place for the time. They saw a woman who they later became convinced was Marie Antoinette herself, sitting on the grass sketching, her dress a classic 18th century gown. Perhaps the most chilling figure was a menacing-looking man with a pockmarked face who suddenly appeared from a small garden kiosk, his expression so hostile that it filled them with a sense of primal dread. What makes the Versailles account so compelling and so distinct from the Fentz story is the caliber of the witnesses. These were not imaginative children or suggestible tourists. They were serious, academic women who were deeply embarrassed by their own experience. They initially avoided discussing the strange events of that afternoon with each other, each fearing the other would think she had lost her senses. It was only weeks later, upon comparing notes and realizing they had independently witnessed the same bizarre details, that they felt compelled to investigate. They returned to Versailles multiple times, attempting to retrace their steps, but could never find the same paths or recreate the conditions of that day. Their subsequent research into the history of the palace and the final days of Marie Antoinette led them to a stunning conclusion. They believed they had not simply seen ghosts, but had somehow physically walked back into a specific, tragic afternoon, the 10th of August, 1792. This was the day the Tuileries Palace was stormed, the day the king and queen were effectively imprisoned, a day of immense panic and confusion when Marie Antoinette would have indeed been at the Trianon, fearing for her life. The story, which they eventually published under pseudonyms in a book titled An Adventure, ignited a firestorm of debate that continues to this day. Skeptics have proposed numerous rational explanations, from the women simply misremembering their route and encountering actors in period costume, to a shared waking dream or a psychological phenomenon known as folie à deux, where a delusion is shared by two closely associated people. Yet, the meticulous nature of their initial, separate accounts and their staunch adherence to the story despite public ridicule and professional risk gives one pause. They described architectural features and landscape details that, according to historical records, had been altered or removed long before their visit, details they could not have known. Their experience suggests a different kind of time travel than the physical transportation of a person. It implies that certain locations can become imbued with such intense emotion and historical significance that, under the right conditions, the past might bleed through, allowing the sensitive observer a fleeting, terrifying glimpse into a moment forever etched into the fabric of a place. What truly sets the Moberly and Jourdain account apart, elevating it beyond a simple ghost story, is the astonishing precision of the details they recorded. These were not vague impressions of a bygone era. They were specific, tangible observations that they documented separately and which later seemed to align with historical reality in ways they found deeply unsettling. The clothing worn by the people they encountered was not generic old-fashioned attire. The two men who directed them, for instance, were described as wearing long, greenish coats and small, three-cornered hats. This was not the formal court dress one might imagine from popular fiction, but a specific style of livery that research indicated was worn by the palace staff and Swiss guards at Versailles during the reign of Louis XVI. The woman they saw sketching was attired in a light summer dress, a fichu, and a large, plain white hat. This was a precise match for the simple, pastoral style that Marie Antoinette famously preferred for her time at the Petit Trianon, a stark contrast to the extravagant court gowns she was obligated to wear elsewhere. Even more compelling were their descriptions of the landscape and architecture, elements that should have been completely different in 1901. They spoke of crossing a small, rustic bridge that spanned a ravine, a feature that modern maps of the area showed no trace of. They described a curious, round, garden kiosk with a classical roof from which the sinister-looking man emerged. They noted specific paths, cottages, and a terrace that simply did not exist in their present day. Initially, these details were used by skeptics to dismiss their story as pure fantasy. How could two educated women claim to see buildings and gardens that weren't there? The turning point came when Moberly and Jourdain, now deeply invested in solving the mystery, began poring over archival maps and architectural plans of the Versailles grounds from the 18th century. To their astonishment, they found evidence for many of the features they had seen. The small bridge, the kiosk, the specific layout of the paths, all of it had existed, but had been altered, demolished, or overgrown by vegetation decades, and in some cases over a century before their visit. They could not have known these details from a casual tourist guidebook. This was obscure historical knowledge. The atmospheric change they both experienced is perhaps the most fascinating and indeed Chinese letter aspect of their account. They didn't just see things, they felt a profound and palpable shift in the very air around them. The bright, cheerful day suddenly became heavy, still, and oppressively dreary. The woods seemed to close in, the trees appearing flat and lifeless like a painted backdrop. Everything was unnaturally quiet, as if all sound had been drained from the world. This description goes beyond a simple visual hallucination. It suggests a total sensory immersion into an environment that was fundamentally different from their own. It evokes the feeling of stepping onto a stage set where a tragedy is about to unfold, a pervasive sense of dread and melancholy that they both felt independently. This emotional and sensory component is what makes the Versailles time slip so enduring. It feels less like seeing a movie and more like being unwillingly cast in one. Their experience implies that certain locations might retain an emotional imprint of their most turbulent moments, and that under the right or perhaps wrong conditions, a sensitive observer might not just see the past but feel its weight and its sorrow. This idea of place memory, or stone tape theory as it would later be called, suggests a form of time travel that is not about physical movement, but about perceptual and emotional resonance, a temporary alignment with a moment of history so powerful it has never truly faded away. While the haunting experiences at Versailles and the urban legend of Rudolph Fentz are captivating historical anomalies, the dawn of the internet age gave rise to a new kind of time travel claimant, one who didn't appear in a puff of smoke but logged on through a dial-up connection. This brings us to the bizarre and incredibly detailed saga of John Titor, a story that unfolded not in a palace garden or a city street, but in the early, unmoderated forums of the internet. Between the years 2000 and 2001, a user with that name began posting on several time travel and physics discussion boards, and what he had to say was nothing short of extraordinary. He calmly explained that he was not a visitor from the past, but an operative from the year 2036, a soldier on a mission to retrieve a specific piece of vintage computer hardware vital to debugging legacy systems in his own war-torn future. Titor's narrative was meticulously crafted and deeply immersive. He wasn't just a man out of time, he was a specific character with a detailed backstory. He claimed to have been born in 1998 in Florida, and he was traveling back to the 1970s on his primary mission, using the year 2000 as a temporary stopover. His mode of transportation was not a magical clock or a supernatural rift, but a technical device he described in surprisingly plausible scientific terms, a time displacement unit installed in a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette powered by two miniature singularities. He engaged directly with forum members, answering their complex questions about the physics of time, travel with a mix of theoretical jargon and practical warnings, describing the process as incredibly dangerous and not a form of tourism. This technical specificity gave his claims a veneer of credibility that pure fantasy would have lacked. What truly captured the global imagination, however, were his predictions. Titor didn't speak in vague, psychic generalities. He provided a chillingly precise timeline of future events. He forecast a devastating civil war in the United States, beginning around 2004 or 2005 over issues of state sovereignty and federal overreach, a conflict that would ultimately fracture the country into 5 smaller regional factions. He spoke of a Third World War occurring around 2015, involving nuclear exchanges that would drastically reduce the global population. Beyond these grand apocalyptic visions, he also made smaller, more testable predictions, like the lack of a manned mission to Mars before 2036, and the eventual confirmation of the existence of the Higgs boson particle, which he called the Higgs singlet, a term he linked to his time machine's functionality. For a period, John Titor became an internet phenomenon. His posts were dissected by believers and skeptics alike, creating a dedicated community of followers who analyzed every word. The timing of his appearance was perfect. The internet was still young enough to be a wild frontier, a place where such a story could flourish without immediate debunking. People were anxious about the new millennium. Y2K fears were still fresh, and the world felt like it was on the cusp of dramatic change. Titor's warnings of civil unrest and global war resonated with these underlying cultural anxieties. When he announced his mission was complete and he was returning to his own time in March of 2001, he simply vanished, leaving behind a legacy of speculation that persists to this day. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that the vast majority of John Titor's major predictions did not come to pass. The United States did not descend into a bloody civil war in 2004. A Third World War did not begin in 2015. His story is now widely regarded as an elaborate and brilliantly executed piece of science fiction, a collaborative online art project or hoax that captured the spirit of its time. Yet, to dismiss it entirely is to miss why it remains so culturally significant. The Titor saga was arguably the first great viral mystery of the internet age, a precursor to modern alternate reality games and deepfake conspiracies. It demonstrated the power of the online world to create and sustain a shared mythology, blurring the lines between reality and fiction for a global audience. It was a story that could only have been born when and where it was, proving that our fascination with time travel evolves right alongside our technology, constantly finding new ways to ask that eternal question, what if? While the grand, apocalyptic visions John Titor laid out failed to materialize, a closer examination of his predictions reveals a far more nuanced and intriguing story. It's in the smaller, more specific details about technology and societal evolution where his narrative occasionally strikes a chord that still resonates today, creating a lingering sense of curiosity about his true origins. He spoke with surprising clarity about the rise of mad cow disease in North America, a concern that was not a major headline topic in 2001, but would later see isolated cases in the United States and Canada, causing brief periods of public anxiety. He also predicted that the European Union and the euro would not last, a claim that seemed increasingly shaky for over a decade until the Brexit vote and subsequent political tensions introduced a new, tangible fragility to the European project, making his assertion feel less like a guaranteed failure and more like a premature observation. His most famous and eerily accurate technological prediction centered on the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Titor claimed that his time machine relied on the manipulation of miniature black holes and that the research at CERN would eventually prove essential to understanding the principles behind his technology. He specifically stated that scientists there would not find the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle, in the way they expected, but would instead discover evidence of what he called the Higgs singlet, a particle that could theoretically travel through time. While the scientific community did indeed confirm the discovery of the Higgs boson in 2012, the concept of the Higgs singlet is a legitimate, though highly theoretical, idea in physics related to quantum time travel. The fact that a random internet user was discussing such an obscure concept years before it entered mainstream scientific discourse is at the very least a remarkable coincidence. Beyond these specific hits and misses, Titor's true prescience may have been less about individual events and more about capturing the underlying mood and trajectory of the early 21st century. He described a future where people had grown deeply distrustful of their governments and institutions, a sentiment that has only intensified in the age of social media and widespread misinformation. He spoke of a culture increasingly divided along political and ideological lines, foreshadowing the intense polarization that now defines politics in many nations. His vision of a fractured America, while not literally coming true with regional warfare, feels metaphorically resonant in an era of stark cultural and political divides that some commentators frequently describe as a cold civil war. He tapped into a deep-seated anxiety about where technology and society were headed, giving a voice to the fears of the new millennium. Ultimately, the enduring fascination with John Titor isn't about whether he was a genuine time traveler. The weight of evidence firmly suggests he was not. The mystery lies in the authorship and the motivation behind one of the Internet's most captivating creative writing projects. Was it a lone, brilliant storyteller with a deep understanding of physics and sociology? Or was it a collaborative effort by a group of writers, an early experiment in viral storytelling? The sophistication of the hoax is what continues to impress, the careful construction of a believable character, the seeding of information across multiple forums, and the disciplined commitment to the narrative before a clean, mystery-preserving exit. The John Titor story is a testament to the power of narrative itself, proving that a well-told story can transcend its medium and capture the imagination of the world, creating a modern myth for the digital age that continues to inspire debate, analysis, and wonder long after its supposed expiration date. While the stories of Versailles and John Titor operate on a personal or prophetic scale, one of the most audacious claims of temporal manipulation involves an entire United States Navy warship and a secret military program shrouded in layers of myth and government denial. This brings us to the infamous and deeply unsettling story of the Philadelphia experiment, a tale that combines cutting-edge science, Cold War paranoia, and nightmarish consequences in a way that has captivated conspiracy theorists for generations. The core of the story is both simple and staggering. In the autumn of 1943, at the height of the Second World War, the U.S. Navy was allegedly conducting top-secret research aimed at rendering their ships invisible to enemy radar. The chosen vessel was the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer escort. According to the legend, the scientists, possibly including the brilliant but unconventional physicist Albert Einstein, weren't just trying to achieve radar cloaking. They were experimenting with theories of unified fields, attempting to bend light and even space-time itself around the ship. The most dramatic version of the event states that on or around October 28, 1943, the experiment was activated in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The results were far more extreme and horrifying than anyone could have predicted. Witnesses, including the crew of a nearby merchant ship, the SS Andrew Furuseth, reported that the Eldridge didn't just become difficult to see on radar screens. It was enveloped in a strange greenish fog and then vanished from sight entirely, only to reappear minutes later. But this wasn't a simple case of optical camouflage. Some accounts insist the ship didn't just disappear from Philadelphia. It physically teleported to the naval yard in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, appearing there for several minutes before flickering back to its original location in Pennsylvania. This instantaneous jump across space suggests a terrifying breach in the very fabric of reality, a manipulation of physical laws that could easily be interpreted as a form of time travel or dimensional shifting. The true horror of the story, however, lies in the aftermath and the personal accounts attributed to the crew. Those who survived the event were said to have suffered devastating physical and psychological effects. Some sailors were reportedly found fused with the metal structure of the ship itself. Their bodies melded horribly with the bulkheads and deck plating. Others were said to have gone completely insane, while a few simply vanished and were never seen again. Perhaps the most chilling claims came from crew members who described experiences of freezing in time, a state where they were conscious but completely immobile, or who claimed to have spent years trapped in another time or dimension, only to find that mere minutes had passed for everyone else when they returned. These personal testimonies, though unverified, paint a picture of a technology that was not only uncontrollable but actively malevolent in its effects on human biology and perception. The origins of this incredible story are as murky as the green fog described around the Eldridge. The tale first began to circulate in the 1950s, primarily through a series of letters sent to astronomer and author Maurice K. Jessup by a man named Carlos Allende, who also used the name Carl Allen. Allende claimed to have been a witness aboard the merchant ship Andrew Furuseth and provided elaborate, if often incoherent, details about the experiment. His letters were filled with eccentric phrasing and strange capitalization, adding an air of unstable authenticity to his claims. The U.S. Navy has consistently and flatly denied that any such experiment ever took place, stating that the claims lack any factual basis and that the technology described far exceeded the scientific capabilities of the 1940s. They have explained the supposed sighting in Norfolk as a simple case of the Eldridge traveling there through conventional means via the inland waterway, a routine voyage that was mistakenly interpreted as teleportation by confused observers. Despite the official denials and the dubious nature of its primary source, the Philadelphia experiment legend has proven to be incredibly resilient. It taps into a potent mix of public fascination with government secrecy, the ethical dilemmas of unchecked scientific ambition, and the primal fear of technology we cannot control. The story resonates because it feels like a warning, a dark fable about the cost of playing God with forces we do not understand. It suggests that the government might possess world-altering secrets and that the boundaries of physics are not as fixed as we are taught. Whether a misunderstood series of events, a deliberate disinformation campaign from the Cold War, or simply a work of science fiction that took on a life of its own, the Philadelphia experiment remains a cornerstone of modern conspiracy theory. It stands as a powerful testament to our enduring belief that the greatest mysteries are not just found in ancient history, but might be hiding in plain sight, concealed within the classified archives of our own governments. The most chilling and enduring aspects of the Philadelphia experiment legend are the horrifying personal accounts of the crew's fate, stories that transform a tale of scientific ambition into a deeply human tragedy. These narratives speak of sailors who paid an unimaginable price for stepping into the unknown, their suffering described in visceral, graphic detail that has cemented the story's place in popular culture. Men were said to have been found partially or entirely fused with the cold steel of the ship itself, their bodies and the metal merging in a grotesque amalgamation, as if the very molecules of man and machine had been scrambled together by unimaginable forces. Others were reported to have simply vanished during the event, never to be seen again, while some survivors were said to have been driven irreversibly insane, left in a permanent state of catatonic shock or babbling terror. Perhaps the most psychologically unsettling claims involved accounts of freezing, where sailors would become immobile, locked in a single moment for hours or days, completely conscious but unable to move or interact with the world around them, experiencing a form of living temporal paralysis. These grisly details, while central to the mythos, have been thoroughly and repeatedly debunked by historians, naval officials, and skeptics. The U.S. Navy has consistently stated that no such experiment occurred, and that the USS Eldridge's logs place it on a routine voyage and in port at the times in question, with no record of any unusual accidents or mass casualties among its crew. Researchers have pointed out that the primary source for these claims, Carl Allen, was an unreliable correspondent known for rambling and contradictory statements. Many believe his story was a hoax, possibly inspired by the Navy's very real, but far more mundane, experiments with degaussing, a process that reduces a ship's magnetic signature to protect it from magnetic mines, a technology that could be loosely described as making a ship invisible to a specific type of detection. The horrifying descriptions of physical fusion and psychological trauma are seen by critics as classic elements of urban legend, designed to evoke a visceral reaction and a sense of moral warning about tampering with nature. Yet, even when stripped of its factual credibility, the enduring power of these sailor stories reveals something profound about our relationship with the concept of time travel. They serve as a powerful metaphor for the perceived dangers of such a technology. The idea of being fused into a ship's hull is a literal representation of the fear of becoming trapped, of losing one's identity and humanity by being irrevocably stuck between states or times. The psychological trauma reflects a deep-seated anxiety that the human mind may not be capable of processing the paradoxes and dislocations of temporal displacement. These stories function as a modern-day myth, a cautionary tale in the same vein as Icarus flying too close to the sun. They warn us that the pursuit of ultimate knowledge and power, especially over something as fundamental as time, could carry a cost too terrible to bear, resulting not in glory but in chaos, suffering, and the ultimate loss of self. This narrative continues to capture our imagination not because we believe it happened, but because on some level we fear that it could, that unlocking the secrets of time might unleash forces we are utterly unprepared to control. But if the Philadelphia experiment represents a modern technological nightmare, our search for the origins of these incredible ideas must take us much further back, to a time when myth and history were inextricably woven together. To truly understand the depth of our fascination with time, we must turn to the world's oldest stories, where the boundaries between the possible and the impossible were often blurred. Ancient texts from various cultures are filled with accounts that, when viewed through a modern lens, seem to describe technologies and phenomena eerily reminiscent of time travel and advanced physics. Perhaps no single work is more ripe for this kind of interpretation than the immense Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. Composed in Sanskrit over many centuries, with its earliest layers dating back more than 2,000 years, the Mahabharata is a colossal narrative that encompasses philosophy, religion, and a profound accounting of an ancient war. Within its verses, however, are descriptions of vehicles and weapons that defy simple explanation, and have led many researchers to question whether they are purely mythological or could be distorted accounts of a lost, advanced technology. The text speaks repeatedly of the Vimana, detailed flying chariots that could travel through the air between kingdoms and even to the heavens. These were not simple mythical constructs. Specific passages provide intricate details about their construction, their operation, and their astonishing capabilities. Some Vimanas are described as being circular and double-decked, with portholes and a dome, powered by a mysterious energy source referred to as mercury vortex engines. The Samarangana Sutradhara, a later text, even devotes entire chapters to the architectural secrets of building these machines, explaining how they could be made to ascend vertically, move diagonally, and travel vast distances at incredible speeds. Even more compelling than the vehicles themselves are the descriptions of their weapons, which bear a startling resemblance to modern arms and suggest a terrifying power over time and space. The epic recounts the use of the Brahmastra, a weapon that was said to be so powerful it could destroy entire continents and disrupt the natural order of the world. When launched, it produced a smoke brighter than 10,000 suns, a description that immediately brings to mind the blinding flash of a nuclear explosion. The aftermath of its use is described in hauntingly familiar terms. Metal objects shattered, the land was poisoned, and survivors lost their hair and nails, suffering from a sickness that sounds unmistakably like radiation poisoning. Other weapons, like the Narayanastra, could create illusions that disoriented entire armies, while the Pashupatastra was said to be capable of destroying all creation, a force that had to be used with ultimate care and precision. The most intriguing passages for time travel theorists involve descriptions of temporal displacement. In one section, the hero Ruveta is said to have traveled to the realm of the god Brahma, spent what felt like a short time there, and returned to Earth to find that many ages had passed and everyone he knew was long dead. This story is a classic trope of temporal relativity, a theme repeated in myths from around the world, from the story of Rip Van Winkle to the Japanese legend of Urashima Taro. It suggests an ancient understanding that time is not a fixed constant, but can flow at different rates in different realms or under different conditions. This idea, which we now understand through Einstein's theory of relativity, seems to have been a part of philosophical thought millennia ago. The Mahabharata also describes instances where warriors seemingly teleported across battlefields or employed cloaking devices to become invisible, further adding to the sense that the conflict it describes was fought with a technology that manipulated the very fabric of reality. Of course, mainstream scholars and historians offer more grounded interpretations. They argue that these passages are powerful metaphors, allegorical descriptions of spiritual powers, or simply the poetic exaggeration common to epic storytelling. The Vimanas, they suggest, could be symbolic representations of spiritual ascent or the power of kingship. The devastating weapons might be mythological amplifications of real but conventional weapons of the Iron Age, their effects dramatized to convey their terror and importance. The time dilation story of Ruveta is seen as a common philosophical parable about the nature of divine time versus mortal time, a concept explored in many religions to illustrate the fleeting nature of human life compared to the eternity of the gods. Yet the persistence of these interpretations speaks to a deeper human desire. The ancient astronaut theory and similar ideas are compelling not because they are necessarily true, but because they challenge our linear view of human progress. They ask us to consider a possibility that is both humbling and exhilarating, that our current technological awakening might not be the first, that a forgotten chapter of human history, now shrouded in myth, could have contained a sophistication that was lost to cataclysm or time. Whether one views the Mahabharata as sacred history, poetic allegory, or a potential record of a lost civilization, its value in this discussion is immense. It demonstrates that humanity's dream of transcending the limits of our physical world, of flying among the clouds, wielding unimaginable power, and even stepping outside the relentless flow of time, is not a modern fantasy born of science fiction. It is an ancient, enduring aspiration etched into our oldest stories, suggesting that the secret of time travel is a mystery that has captivated the human spirit for thousands of years. The level of detail in these ancient accounts is what truly gives modern theorists pause, moving beyond vague allegory into what sounds like technical documentation. The Vaimanika Sastra, a 20th century text that claims to be based on far older sources, doesn't just say these vehicles flew. It describes them as being constructed from specific, lightweight metals called Raja Loha and powered by complex engines that utilized mercury and other mysterious energy sources to manipulate gravitational and electromagnetic fields. The text even classifies different types of Vimanas. The Rukma Vimana was said to be conical and golden, while the Sundara Vimana was more rocket-like in shape, and details their operational capacities, including stealth capabilities, the power to become invisible, and the ability to travel not just through the atmosphere but across vast cosmic distances. For those who read these passages with a modern eye, it becomes incredibly difficult to dismiss them as purely the products of imaginative fiction. They read instead like fragmented, misunderstood records of an incredibly sophisticated aerospace technology. This interpretation leads to a fascinating and controversial question. If these were real technologies, what became of them? Proponents of the ancient astronaut theory or the idea of a lost advanced civilization suggest that this knowledge was lost in a great cataclysm, perhaps a global flood or even an ancient war so devastating it reset human civilization. The Mahabharata itself describes a war that nearly destroyed the world, leaving the survivors to rebuild from the ashes. In this scenario, the detailed technical knowledge required to build and operate such machines would have been lost, surviving only as distorted myths and legends passed down through generations. The Vimanas became flying chariots of the gods because that was the only framework our ancestors had to understand such incredible machines. The weapons became the wrath of deities because their destructive power was so absolute it seemed divine. This perspective reframes our entire understanding of human history, suggesting that technological progress is not a straight upward line, but a cycle of rise, catastrophic fall, and slow rediscovery. The time travel aspect emerges from specific, haunting narratives within the epic. The most famous is the story of King Kakudmi and his daughter Revati, who traveled to the abode of the creator god Brahma to seek counsel on finding a suitable husband. Their audience is brief. They wait while Brahma listens to a musical performance. When they finally speak with him and prepare to return home, Brahma informs them that during their short stay in his realm, 27 cycles of the 4 ages, a period amounting to over 100,000 years, have passed on Earth. They return to find their entire kingdom, their culture, and everyone they ever knew are long gone, buried by the immense weight of time. This is not just a story about the gods being timeless. It is a precise description of time dilation, a concept that Einstein's theory of relativity would explain millennia later. That time is not absolute and can pass at different rates for different observers, especially when dealing with immense gravitational fields or velocities approaching the speed of light. In the framework of the Vimana texts, one could theorize that their journey to Brahma's realm involved traveling at such fantastic speeds or through such warped space-time that this differential aging effect occurred. Mainstream academia, of course, offers a different and equally valid perspective. Scholars of Sanskrit literature and ancient Indian history emphasize that these texts are first and foremost works of profound religious and philosophical importance. The descriptions of Vimanas and celestial weapons are widely understood as allegory. The Vimana can be seen as a metaphor for the soul's journey towards enlightenment, a vehicle for transcending the mundane world. The devastating astras are not literal weapons of mass destruction but symbolic representations of the catastrophic consequences of unchecked ego, desire, and adharma, the violation of cosmic order. The story of Kakudmi and Revati is a classic philosophical parable on the illusory nature of time, Maya, and the fleeting, insignificant duration of a human life when compared to the vast cycles of the universe. From this viewpoint, interpreting these stories as literal accounts of technology is to miss their deeper spiritual meaning, reducing a sophisticated metaphysical system to a simplistic ancient sci-fi narrative. The enduring power of the Mahabharata, however, lies in its magnificent ambiguity. It allows for both readings to coexist. We can appreciate its immense value as a spiritual and philosophical guide while also being captivated by the tantalizing possibility that within its verses lies an encrypted record of a forgotten age. This duality is what makes the epic so endlessly fascinating. It doesn't just tell us about gods and kings, it sparks our imagination and challenges our assumptions about the past. Whether these stories are divine allegory or distorted history, They demonstrate that the human fascination with transcending our limits of soaring through the heavens, harnessing incredible power, and even conquering time itself is not a modern obsession. It is a dream as ancient as civilization, a secret whispered in our oldest stories, waiting for us to understand. This profound spiritual event, known as Al-Isra wal Miraj, offers a fascinating perspective that resonates deeply with our theme. According to Islamic tradition, this miraculous journey occurred in a single night. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was first transported from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, a journey that would have taken a month by caravan. Then from Jerusalem, he ascended through the seven heavens, encountering previous prophets and ultimately experiencing a direct communion with the divine. For the faithful, this is a cornerstone of belief, a testament to Allah's limitless power. Yet, when we examine the event's physical descriptions, it becomes almost impossible not to draw parallels to concepts we now explore in theoretical physics. The most striking element is the creature that facilitated the journey, the Burak. Islamic texts describe it as a dazzling white being, larger than a donkey but smaller than a mule, with a human-like face and incredible speed. With a single stride, it could place its hoof at the farthest point its eye could see. This description, while symbolic, echoes the idea of a vehicle or a technology capable of traversing vast distances not through conventional movement, but by seemingly contracting space itself. The sensation described, of a swift, effortless journey through the heavens, aligns remarkably with how we might imagine travel within a warped space-time continuum, where the normal rules of distance and time simply do not apply. The experience within the heavens themselves introduces the concept of time dilation in a way that feels almost literal. In the highest heaven, beyond the realm of the seven prophets, time is described as ceasing to have any meaning. The prophet received the commandment for Muslims to pray 50 times each day. As he descended back through the heavens, Prophet Moses advised him to return and ask for a reduction, noting that his followers would never be able to keep such a demanding schedule. Muhammad ascended and descended between the divine presence and Moses several times until the prayers were reduced to 5. The critical detail here is that each negotiation, each round trip through the celestial realms, took no time at all back on earth. The entire negotiation, which from a narrative perspective must have felt like an extensive process, occurred within the same single night. For the prophet, time seemed to stretch and contract. What felt like a long dialogue in the heavens passed in an instant on earth. This mirrors the twin paradox of Einstein's relativity, where a traveler moving a Chinese letter light speed would age slower than their twin who remained on Earth. In this spiritual context, the prophet's journey through the higher dimensions of the heavens placed him in a state where the flow of time was fundamentally different. When he returned, the water from the vessel he had knocked over was still spilling, indicating that his physical body had only been absent for a fleeting moment, while his consciousness had experienced an epic voyage. This isn't to reduce a profound article of faith to mere physics, but rather to highlight how this ancient narrative grapples with and provides an answer to the very same mysteries of time and space that captivate us today. It suggests that the boundaries of reality are far more permeable than our everyday experience allows us to believe. The ultimate significance of the night journey, however, transcends any potential physical explanation. For over 1 billion Muslims, it is not a puzzle to be solved but a truth to be embraced, a definitive miracle that confirmed the prophet's status and solidified the spiritual connection between Mecca, Jerusalem, and the divine realm. It serves as a powerful metaphor for the human soul's potential to transcend its earthly limitations and ascend towards the ultimate truth. The event is so central that it is commemorated daily in the 5 prayers that were ordained that night, and it established Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem as the 3rd holiest site in Islam. This enduring spiritual legacy reminds us that whether we approach these stories through the lens of faith or the lens of science, They point toward a universal human yearning to understand our place within the cosmos and to connect with something greater than the confines of our immediate reality. During this extraordinary ascent, the narrative takes a fascinating turn that has captivated not only theologians, but also those curious about the nature of time itself. The prophet is described as meeting and interacting with a succession of previous prophets, each one positioned in a different heaven. He encounters Adam in the first heaven, Jesus and John the Baptist in the second, Joseph in the third, and so on, culminating with Abraham in the seventh. These weren't just brief visions, they were meaningful interactions and conversations. The profound implication here is that these figures, who lived and died across thousands of years of earthly history, were all present and conscious in a single, simultaneous moment. For a modern audience, this scenario is instantly recognizable. It presents a classic time travel paradox where individuals from vastly different historical eras are brought together outside the constraints of a linear timeline. It's as if the heavens operated as a kind of spiritual archive or a dimension where all of time is accessible at once, allowing for a congregation of history's greatest spiritual guides. This gathering of prophets from disparate epochs is particularly striking because it suggests a form of temporal pluralism. The figures Muhammad met were not merely representations or spirits. According to the tradition, they were their complete conscious selves. Abraham, who lived roughly 2,000 years before Jesus, was there in his full identity, as was Jesus himself. This collapses the entire prophetic timeline into a single, shared experience, completely unbound by the chronological sequence we understand. For those interpreting the event through a speculative lens, this doesn't sound like a simple dream or a vision constrained by the dreamer's own knowledge. Instead, it resembles a journey into a realm where time is not a river flowing in one direction, but a vast ocean where every moment exists concurrently. The experience implies that what we perceive as the past is not gone, and the future is not unformed. From a higher dimensional perspective, all of time might be equally present and accessible, a concept that finds echoes in certain interpretations of modern quantum theory and block universe models. The interactions themselves add another layer of depth to this interpretation. The prophets didn't just offer greetings, they recognized Muhammad and affirmed his mission as the final messenger, creating a powerful narrative of continuity and divine plan that transcends time. This exchange of recognition and validation across centuries could be seen as more than just symbolic. If we entertain the possibility of a non-linear timescape, it raises the question of whether these prophets had a consciousness that existed outside of their own historical context, allowing for a form of communication that would be impossible within our conventional understanding of cause and effect. It presents a model of reality where the flow of information isn't locked into a forward-moving arrow, but can be shared across ages, suggesting that the separation between past, present, and future might be an illusion of our limited perception rather than an absolute law of the universe. Ultimately, whether one views the night journey as a profound spiritual metaphor or a literal account of a journey beyond space-time, its power to inspire wonder remains undiminished. It stands as one of history's most detailed and resonant records of an individual experiencing a reality where the normal rules of time and space simply do not apply. This story, embraced by faith for over 14 centuries, continues to offer a rich and compelling narrative for anyone fascinated by the ultimate mysteries of consciousness, time, and our place within the cosmos. While the stories of ancient texts and miraculous journeys present mysteries on a grand scale, sometimes the most compelling evidence for the strange nature of time comes from the seemingly mundane experiences of ordinary, credible individuals. This brings us to one of the most famous and well-documented accounts from the 20th century, a case that involves not a prophet or a sailor, but a highly disciplined and respected military pilot. In the spring of 1935, Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard, a senior officer in the Royal Air Force, was embarking on a routine flight from Scotland to England. His mission was simple: to inspect a recently decommissioned and abandoned airfield at Drem, just outside of Edinburgh. The weather that day, however, was anything but routine, and it would set the stage for an experience that would challenge his understanding of reality. Goddard was flying an open cockpit biplane, a Hawker Hart, and as he approached his destination, he found himself flying directly into a brewing storm. The skies darkened dramatically, and he was soon engulfed in a torrential downpour accompanied by powerful, buffeting winds. Concerned for his safety and struggling to maintain control of his aircraft in the severe conditions, he decided to abandon his inspection and instead fly low to get a visual bearing on the Drem airfield before turning back. What happened next would defy all logical explanation. As he descended through the violent squall, he suddenly broke through the base of the clouds into a strange, otherworldly clearing. The rain abruptly stopped, and the sky above the airfield was now bathed in an eerie, yellow-tinged light, a stark and unsettling contrast to the raging storm he had just flown through. It was in this bizarre pocket of calm that Goddard saw something impossible. The airfield below him was no longer the derelict, abandoned site he knew it to be. The grass runway, which in reality was overgrown and neglected, now appeared freshly mown and meticulously maintained. The crumbling hangars were suddenly intact, their roofs gleaming as if newly repaired. Most astonishing of all, the airfield was bustling with activity. 4 aircraft were parked on the tarmac, and a team of mechanics in what looked like dark blue overalls were moving around them, seemingly going about their duties. Goddard noted that the planes were monoplanes, a radical design shift from the biplanes like his own that comprised the entire RAF fleet in 1935. They were painted in a bright canary yellow scheme, a color not used by any military force at the time. He flew low over the scene, utterly bewildered, before the strange weather phenomenon seemed to release its grip. His plane was suddenly sucked back up into the violent storm, the vision of the operational airfield vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. For years, Goddard kept this bewildering experience largely to himself, doubting his own senses and fearing the professional ridicule that would surely follow if he reported seeing phantom airfields. The event might have remained his private secret if not for the rapid and terrifying march of global events. With the outbreak of the Second World War just a few years later, the Royal Air Force underwent a massive technological revolution. The old biplanes were rapidly phased out and replaced with new, advanced monoplane fighters like the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane. In 1939, the RAF introduced a new system for training aircraft, mandating that they be painted a specific high-visibility color to avoid accidents. That color was a distinct bright yellow. Furthermore, the mechanics' uniforms evolved from the lighter blue of the pre-war era to the darker blue that Goddard had described. Every single detail of his vision, which had seemed so nonsensical in 1935, had become a concrete reality by 1939. The implications of the Goddard incident are profound and deeply unsettling. It suggests that he did not simply imagine the future, but that he physically flew through a temporal window, a literal rift in the weather that was also a rift in time. He wasn't having a premonition, he was a witness. He observed the Drem airfield as it would be configured and operated 4 years into the future, at a time when it had been reactivated as a vital training base during the war. This account moves beyond psychology and into the realm of physics, presenting a case where the environment itself, the very weather and light, seemed to be part of the temporal distortion. Unlike a dream or a vision, Goddard's experience was grounded in a specific geographic location and occurred during a specific, verifiable flight. His credibility as a high-ranking officer, coupled with the precise and previously unimaginable details of his vision that later came true, elevates his story beyond mere coincidence and positions it as one of the most compelling pieces of anecdotal evidence for the existence of time slips, a momentary and involuntary glimpse into what is yet to come. What makes the Goddard incident stand out so starkly in the annals of strange phenomena isn't just the bizarre nature of the event itself, but the impeccable character of the man who reported it. Sir Victor Goddard was not a prone-to-fantasy civilian. He was a decorated air marshal, a man trained in precise observation and sober, factual reporting. His entire career was built on a foundation of discipline, accuracy, and trustworthiness. This high-ranking officer had absolutely nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward with a story that could easily have been dismissed as the hallucination of a pilot stressed by a dangerous storm. His initial reluctance to speak about it for years underscores this point. He was deeply troubled by an experience that defied his rational, military worldview. It was only the uncanny fulfillment of every bizarre detail he witnessed that eventually compelled him to share his story, transforming a personal mystery into a compelling historical puzzle. The precision of the details he recorded is what lifts this account from the realm of vague premonition into something far more concrete. He didn't just have a feeling that the airfield would be busy again. He saw specific, tangible elements that were utterly alien to 1935. The monoplanes were a revolutionary concept at a time when biplane design was still the unquestioned standard for military aircraft. The bright yellow paint scheme was not just unusual, it was non-existent. No air force in the world painted its training aircraft such a vivid, unmistakable color in the mid-1930s. The mechanics' dark blue uniforms were a minor but significant deviation from the standard issue of the day. Each of these elements, insignificant on its own, formed a cohesive and impossible picture of a future that had not yet been imagined, let alone implemented. This wasn't a guess about general technological progress. It was a snapshot of a very specific future reality, down to the most mundane details. When these visions became concrete facts just a few years later, the coincidence became too staggering to ignore. The outbreak of war necessitated rapid technological advancement, and the RAF's shift to monoplanes like the Spitfire and Hurricane was a direct response to the looming threat. The introduction of the all-yellow paint scheme for training aircraft in 1939 was a deliberate safety measure, a brand-new policy decision made long after Goddard's flight. The change in uniform color was another gradual evolution that aligned perfectly with his account. The reactivation and modernization of the DREM airfield itself completed the picture. Every single element of his vision had manifested independently, creating a perfect match between his inexplicable experience and the reality of the wartime airfield. For skeptics, this could be written off as an astonishing series of lucky guesses, but for Goddard and many researchers, it felt like something far more profound. It suggested he hadn't predicted the future so much as he had briefly visited it, his plane acting as a temporary vessel crossing an unforeseen temporal boundary. This case forces us to consider a mechanism for time perception that goes beyond mere intuition or prophecy. The conditions of the storm are crucial to this interpretation. Goddard wasn't meditating or dreaming. He was fighting for control of his aircraft in a violent meteorological event. Some theorists have proposed that extreme electromagnetic or gravitational disturbances, such as those found in severe thunderstorms, could potentially warp the local fabric of spacetime, creating a temporary bridge or window into another time. In this view, the storm wasn't just a backdrop. It was the active engine of the phenomenon, a natural particle accelerator that briefly opened a doorway Goddard unintentionally flew through. His experience implies that these temporal rifts might not be smooth, gentle transitions, but violent, disorienting events tied to powerful environmental forces, making them both incredibly rare and nearly impossible to study or replicate under controlled conditions. The enduring legacy of the Goddard incident is its powerful challenge to our linear perception of time. It presents time not as a rigid, one-way street, but as a landscape that might, under very rare and specific circumstances, be traversed or observed from a different angle. For a military man who dealt in charts, coordinates, and predictable physics, this was a deeply unsettling revelation. For us, it remains one of the most credible and well-documented invitations to wonder if the past and future are truly fixed and separate, or if they exist in a state of potential that we only rarely and accidentally are allowed to see. Among these many stories that challenge our understanding of time, few are as personal, peculiar, and visually compelling as the strange case that emerged from Sweden in the 1970s. It's an account that moves away from grand historical narratives and military experiments, bringing the mystery of time travel right into a cramped apartment bathroom. The story centers on a man named Håkan Nordqvist, an ordinary individual who found himself at the center of an extraordinary event one completely mundane morning. According to his own detailed testimony, the day began with a frustrating but common household problem: a persistent water leak under his kitchen sink. As any of us might do, he gathered his tools, got down on the floor, and attempted to fix the plumbing himself. After struggling for some time without success, he decided the job was beyond his skill and that he needed to call a professional plumber for help. It was at this precise moment of surrender that the day took a surreal turn. The doorbell to his apartment rang. Assuming it was a neighbor or perhaps the building superintendent, Håkan went to answer it. Standing in the hallway was an elderly man he did not recognize, who immediately and confidently announced that he was there to fix the leak. Håkan was baffled. He had not yet had time to even pick up the phone to call anyone. Puzzled but relieved, he let the man in. The elderly gentleman went straight to the kitchen, got to work under the sink with an air of complete familiarity, and repaired the leak with astonishing speed and efficiency. As Håkan looked on, growing increasingly bewildered by the man's uncanny knowledge of his apartment and the specific problem, the repairman finished his work and then turned to face him with a calm and knowing smile. What he said next would redefine Håkan Nordqvist's entire reality. The man looked him directly in the eyes and stated simply, "I am you." The elderly man claimed to be Håkan Nordqvist from the future, having traveled back in time to this specific moment to help his younger self with a problem he clearly remembered struggling with decades earlier. To prove this incredible assertion, the future Håkan allegedly began recounting a series of intensely personal and private memories from his younger self's life, details about his childhood, his family, and events that no stranger could possibly know. The younger Håkan was understandably in a state of complete shock. The conversation that followed was a bizarre mix of past and present colliding, with the future Håkan offering bits of advice and reassurance before preparing to leave. Seizing the moment and perhaps sensing that this opportunity would never come again, the younger Håkan did something that would make this story unique among all time travel claims. He asked if they could take a photograph together. The older man agreed. Håkan grabbed his camera, set it on a timer, and captured a single, now iconic image of the two of them standing together in his apartment. The older man then left, and Håkan Nordqvist was left alone with a fixed sink, a photograph, and a story that would define the rest of his life. What sets the Nordqvist case apart from every other story we've explored is that one piece of tangible, physical evidence: the photograph. It wasn't a blurry, distant shot of a mysterious figure. It was a clear, well-lit, close-up portrait of two men who undeniably look related, standing arm in arm. The older man has a kind, weathered face and a head of white hair, while the younger Håkan looks on with an expression that perfectly blends confusion and awe. For many who encountered the story, this photo was the clincher. It seemed to provide the proof that had always been missing from other accounts, a document that said, "This happened, this was real." The image was analyzed and debated for years. Some argued the resemblance was striking and could easily be the same person separated by decades. Others were more skeptical, pointing out differences in their ear shapes and other facial features that might suggest they were simply two different men who looked somewhat alike. Håkan Nordqvist himself never wavered in his story. He maintained until his death that the event was completely real and that the photograph was genuine documentation of his encounter with his future self. He never sought fame or money from the incident. In fact, he was often reluctant to discuss it, only sharing the details when pressed. His consistent and sincere retelling of the events, coupled with the bizarre but harmless nature of the encounter, after all, the time traveler's mission was merely to fix a sink, lends the story a certain charming credibility that more grandiose claims often lack. There was no warning of future apocalypses, no complex physics explained, just an old man helping his younger self with a chore he remembered as being particularly annoying. This mundane motivation is, in a way, one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire tale. If time travel were possible, wouldn't helping your past self avoid a moment of frustration be exactly the kind of thing you might do? Skeptics, of course, have proposed more down-to-earth explanations. The most obvious theory is that the entire event was an elaborate hoax orchestrated by Håkon Nordqvist, perhaps with the help of an actor who bore a passing resemblance to him. The purpose for such a hoax, however, remains utterly unclear, as he never monetized the story or seemed to enjoy the attention it brought. Another theory suggests that the event was a psychological episode, a vivid hallucination or a fugue state brought on by the stress of the plumbing problem, though this fails to account for the physical photograph. Could the future self have simply been a clever and kind-hearted stranger who bore a resemblance and decided to play an elaborate prangle? It seems unlikely, but not entirely impossible. The photograph itself, while compelling, is not definitive proof. Without the original negative for modern forensic analysis, it remains an intriguing piece of a puzzle that we may never fully solve. Ultimately, the power of Håkon Nordqvist's story lies in its humanity. It reduces the colossal, universe-bending concept of time travel to a simple, personal act of kindness. It's a story not about changing the course of history, but about fixing a leaky pipe. Not about confronting cosmic horrors, but about offering a reassuring smile from across the decades. This ordinariness is what makes it so extraordinary and so enduringly appealing. It suggests that if time travel is ever invented, its most common use might not be for grand historical tourism or to prevent disasters, but for the small, intimate moments, to offer a helping hand to our past selves, to share a piece of wisdom, or simply to let ourselves know that everything is going to be okay. Whether a genuine anomaly, a shared delusion, or a beautifully crafted mystery, the tale of the two Håkons continues to capture our imagination because it presents time travel not as a terrifying power, but as a potential act of compassion, a closed loop of help and gratitude spanning a lifetime. That single photograph, a slightly faded color print from the 1970s, became the undeniable centerpiece of Håkon Nordqvist's incredible claim. It's one thing to tell a wild story, it's another to present a piece of visual evidence that seems to back it up. The image shows two men standing side by side in a modest, slightly cluttered apartment. On the left is a younger Håkon with dark, receding hair and a look of bemused disbelief on his face. His arm is wrapped around the shoulders of an older gentleman with a full head of white hair, a kind, wrinkled face, and a calm, knowing smile. They look comfortable together, like family, and the undeniable resemblance is the first thing that strikes any observer. It's the kind of photo you might see at a family reunion, a picture of a son with his father or grandfather. But according to the story, it's a picture of a man with himself, separated by decades. This photograph has been poked, prodded, and analyzed ever since it entered the public sphere. Skeptics, particularly those with expertise in photography and visual forensics, have put forward a number of compelling arguments for why it might be a hoax. The most common theory is that this was a simple case of finding a look-alike. Perhaps Håkon found an elderly man who bore a passing resemblance to him or to his own father, and they staged the entire encounter for reasons unknown. Experts have pointed to subtle differences between the two men that go beyond simple aging: the shape of the ears, the exact placement of the hairline, the structure of the jawline. They argue that while the two men look similar, they are not identical, and the differences are too pronounced to be the same person. Furthermore, the technology to convincingly forge such an image in the 1970s was incredibly limited, making a complex photo manipulation job highly unlikely for an ordinary person. This leads most skeptics to conclude it was a clever, low-tech hoax using an actor, a conclusion that seems, on the surface, to be the most rational and Occam's razor-like explanation. Yet, for every point of skepticism, there is a counterpoint that keeps the mystery intriguingly alive. Proponents of the story highlight the nuances that a simple hoax might miss. They point out that the body language in the photo is remarkably natural and unforced. The younger Hakan isn't holding himself in a stiff, posed way. His expression is a perfect mix of shock, confusion, and tentative comfort. The older man's smile seems genuinely warm and affectionate, not the strained expression of a paid actor playing a bizarre role. The setting itself is perfectly mundane, the kind of everyday background that would be difficult to consciously replicate for a fake photo. There are no theatrical props or dramatic lighting. It feels like a snapshot from a real life. And then there are the smaller, more personal details that Hakan shared about their conversation, the specific private memories the older man recalled. If this was a hoax, it would require an accomplice who was not only a convincing physical match, but also privy to a deep well of Hakan's most personal history, which seems like an enormous amount of effort for a prank that yielded no apparent reward. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the entire affair is Hakan Nordqvist's own consistent demeanor throughout his life. He never tried to profit from his story. He didn't write a book, sell the photo to a tabloid, or go on a speaking tour. By all accounts, he was a private, somewhat reluctant participant in the fame that found him, only discussing the event when asked and always sticking to the same precise details without embellishment. There was no financial gain, no clear motive for such an elaborate deception. This doesn't prove the story is true, of course, but it does make the standard hoax explanation feel slightly less satisfying. If it was a joke he played on the entire world for no apparent reason, and one that he never chose to laugh about himself. His steadfast, sincere belief in what happened adds a layer of human credibility that pure physical evidence sometimes lacks. In the end, the photograph of the two Hakans exists in a fascinating gray area, a Rorschach test for our willingness to believe. For skeptics, it is a curious artifact of a cleverly staged illusion, a testament to the power of suggestion and our brain's desire to find patterns and resemblances where they might not perfectly exist. For believers, it is a tantalizing piece of evidence, a rare physical document that suggests the barriers between past and future might not be as impermeable as we assume. The truth may never be definitively known, but the enduring fascination with this single Polaroid proves that the most compelling evidence for the impossible is often not a complex scientific instrument, but a simple human story captured in a moment of shared time. While we often picture time travel as a physical journey in a gleaming machine, what if the most accessible gateway to other times has been inside our own minds all along? The concept of dreaming as a form of temporal exploration is one of the most intimate and widely reported anomalies of human experience. Throughout history, countless individuals have described dreams that felt less like fantasy and more like vivid visits to other eras, or even startling previews of events yet to come. This idea moves beyond superstition when we consider the testimonials of some of history's greatest scientific minds, who credited their world-changing breakthroughs not to slow, laborious research alone, but to sudden, inexplicable flashes of insight that arrived in their sleep. These weren't just simple ideas, they were complete, complex visions of inventions and theories that seemed to download fully formed from somewhere beyond their waking consciousness. No figure exemplifies this phenomenon more strikingly than the brilliant and enigmatic Nikola Tesla. Tesla himself wrote extensively about his unique mental processes, describing an ability to visualize his inventions with photographic precision and to run tests entirely within the theater of his own mind. But he also spoke of dreams that bordered on the prophetic. He claimed that the concept for his revolutionary alternating current induction motor came to him in a blinding vision while he was walking in a park, an idea he had been turning over for years but which suddenly assembled itself into perfect, working order in a moment of inspired clarity that felt dreamlike. Even more tellingly, he reported a heartbreakingly vivid dream about his mother's death, seeing her float into the room surrounded by angels just hours before he received the telegram informing him she had passed away. For Tesla, the boundary between the dreaming world and the waking world was unusually porous, a conduit for information that seemed to transcend the ordinary limits of time and space. Similarly, Albert Einstein's own work on the nature of time itself was reportedly sparked by a formative teenage dream. The story goes that as a young man, he dreamed he was riding on a sled down a mountainside, moving faster and faster until he approached the speed of light. In his dream, he looked up at the stars and saw their light distorting, their colors shifting in a way that defied conventional physics. This visceral, experiential dream of traveling at light speed is said to have planted the crucial seed for his later theories of special and general relativity, giving him a tangible feel for the concepts of time dilation and the curvature of spacetime that would later make him famous. While we can't know the exact details of a private dream from over a century ago, the anecdote persists because it feels symbolically true to the kind of intuitive, non-linear thinking that characterized Einstein's genius. It suggests that his deepest understanding of time began not with a complex equation, but with a felt sense of its malleability. This leads us to a compelling and controversial speculation. Could these brilliant minds have been doing more than just creatively problem-solving in their sleep? Is it possible that their brains, operating at a frequency most of us rarely access, were somehow able to tune into a stream of information that exists outside of our linear timeline? The theoretical framework for this idea finds a curious partner in modern physics, particularly in the concept of the block universe theory. This theory, which is consistent with Einstein's equations, proposes that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. From a higher dimensional perspective, every moment in time is just as real and permanent as every point in space. If this is true, then the future isn't some unformed potential. It's already out there, a landscape that is just as fixed and real as the past, even if we can't perceive it from our limited vantage point. In this model, the human brain might not be a mere computer calculating probabilities. Instead, it could be more like a radio receiver. Most of the time, we're tuned to one specific station, the present moment. But during certain altered states of consciousness, like deep meditation, intense focus, or the dream state, that tuning might become less precise. We might accidentally drift across the dial, picking up faint signals from other stations, impressions from the past, or flashes from the future. For a mind as uniquely wired and intensely focused as Tesla's or Einstein's, this receiver might be exceptionally sensitive, allowing them to pull in coherent signals. A complete schematic for a new engine, a fundamental principle of the universe that to them felt like a divine download or a vivid dream, but was in fact a form of accidental psychological time travel. Their breakthroughs weren't inventions in this view, but discoveries, a sudden, conscious awareness of a truth that already existed in the vast, timeless library of the cosmos. This notion of dreaming as a form of temporal navigation brings us to a far more common and deeply personal phenomenon than any tale of phantom airfields or future plumbers, the prophetic dream. Across cultures and centuries, an uncountable number of people have reported dreams that seem to offer a startlingly clear window into future events, presenting a form of time displacement that feels less like science fiction and more like an innate, if mysterious, human faculty. While the grand claims of time travelers capture our imagination, these personal accounts of precognition touch something far more universal: the quiet, private suspicion that our minds might occasionally brush against the fabric of time in ways we cannot yet measure or understand. The historical record is rich with such anecdotes, often involving individuals of noted credibility who are deeply unsettled by their own experiences. Perhaps one of the most famous and well-documented cases from the 19th century involves Abraham Lincoln. Just days before his assassination in 1865, the president reportedly shared a haunting dream with his wife and a few close companions. He described a dream of walking through the silent rooms of the White House, drawn by the sound of subdued weeping until he arrived in the East Room. There he found a funeral scene, a casket surrounded by mourners and guarded by soldiers. When he asked one of the guards who had died, the soldier replied, "The president." He was killed by an assassin. Lincoln awoke from this vision deeply troubled, a feeling he could not shake. While some historians debate the precise timing of the dream, the account persists because it aligns so perfectly with the profound weight and foreshadowing that often accompanies these experiences, suggesting a mind subconsciously grappling with the terrifying possibilities of its own future. Equally compelling are the countless personal testimonies from ordinary people that never make it into history books. These are the dreams of a mother who vividly sees the specific details of a car accident involving her son hours before receiving the phone call, or of a person who dreams of a long-lost friend only to run into them the very next day. What makes these accounts so fascinating is their specificity. It's rarely a vague feeling of dread or a generic symbol. It's often a hyper-detailed snapshot of an event yet to unfold. The dreamer might see the exact pattern on a stranger's tie, the specific model of a burning car, or hear a snippet of a conversation word for word, details that are later verified with chilling accuracy. This level of precision moves the experience beyond simple coincidence or selective memory, pointing toward a genuine anomaly in how consciousness interacts with time. From a scientific perspective, these phenomena are incredibly difficult to study or explain. Mainstream psychology often attributes them to a combination of confirmation bias, where we remember the hits and forget the far more numerous misses, and the brain's incredible capacity for subconscious pattern recognition. Our minds are constantly processing millions of bits of information below the level of our awareness, and it's possible that a dream could be the conscious manifestation of a subconscious prediction, a brilliant piece of mental detective work that surfaces in our sleep. However, this compelling theory often struggles to account for the dreams that involve information the dreamer could not possibly have deduced, such as the exact whereabouts of a missing object or the specific details of an event happening miles away. This is where the concept of time travel re-enters the discussion, not as a physical journey but as a mental one. If theories like the block universe are correct, if all of time exists simultaneously, then the future is already out there, a landscape as real as the past. In this model, prophetic dreaming might not be a matter of prediction but of perception. The dreaming brain, freed from the rigid linear constraints of waking consciousness, might occasionally and accidentally tune into this broader reality. It might dip into the vast river of time and bring back a fragment of what it encountered, presenting it to us as a vivid and often confusing dream. This wouldn't require a machine or a wormhole. It would require only a shift in the frequency of our awareness, a temporary loosening of the cognitive anchors that keep us locked in the present moment. The stories of geniuses like Tesla and Einstein finding inspiration in their dreams further blur this line. Was the alternating current motor truly Tesla's invention, or was it a discovery, a piece of future technology that his uniquely receptive mind accessed and downloaded? Did Einstein truly derive relativity from first principles, or did his dream of riding a light beam grant him a direct, experiential understanding of a physical law that already existed in the timeless structure of the universe? These questions venture into the realm of speculation, but they highlight a profound possibility that the greatest breakthroughs in human history might not be creations ex nihilo, but rather moments of profound synchronization, where a conscious mind suddenly aligns with a truth that exists across all time. This view transforms the dream state from a mere theater of the mind into a potential gateway, a natural mechanism for a form of mental time travel that has shaped our history and continues to hint at the incredible, untapped potential hidden within our own consciousness. This brings us to a case that is less about witnessing the future and more about stepping out of our recognized reality entirely, the baffling and endlessly debated mystery of the Tord Man. If the previous stories left us questioning the linear flow of time, this one challenges the very map of our world. In the summer of 1954, at a bustling Tokyo airport, customs officials encountered a traveler who would become a ghost in the bureaucracy of international travel. The man was Caucasian, well-dressed, and appeared to be a businessman. He presented a passport that, at first glance, seemed perfectly ordinary, but upon closer inspection, the officials found themselves utterly bewildered. The document was issued by a nation called Tord. The man spoke multiple languages fluently, including Japanese, and expressed complete confidence that Tord was a real and sovereign country, located in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain, a region that has, in our world, always been home to the tiny Principality of Andorra. He claimed his nation had existed for 1,000 years and that this was just one of many business trips he had taken to Japan. To back up his story, he carried a driver's license and bank statements from Tord, all appearing official and legitimate. For the customs agents, this was more than a simple paperwork error. It was an impossibility. They showed him a map and asked him to point to his homeland. Without a moment's hesitation, he placed his finger directly on the location of Andorra, insisting that was Tord and expressing confusion that the map labeled it incorrectly. Here was a man, coherent and professional, living in a reality that perfectly mirrored our own except for this one colossal geographical difference. With no way to process his documents and growing increasingly concerned, the authorities made a decision. They could not admit him into the country, but they also could not let him simply leave. They escorted him to a nearby hotel room, placing him under guard until the situation could be resolved. The hotel room was on a high floor with only one door, which was guarded by 2 officials through the night. They took his passport and all his identifying documents for further examination. The next morning, when they entered the room to resume their questioning, they found it completely empty. The man was gone, the window was closed and locked from the inside, and the guards swore no one had entered or exited. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the lingering, unsettling question of where or when he had truly come from. A subsequent investigation reportedly found no record of a country named Tord, and the company he claimed to be doing business with in Tokyo had never heard of him. The Tord Man story is perhaps the ultimate example of a dimensional slip or a reality shift, a concept that feels even more alien than simple time travel. It suggests that our universe might not be the only one, that there could be an infinite number of parallel realities existing alongside our own, each with its own slightly different history and geography. In one of these worlds, a rocky outcrop in the Pyrenees might indeed be the sovereign nation of Tord, with its own centuries-old culture, government, and passports. The mysterious traveler, then, wouldn't be a time tourist but a dimensional tourist, a man who accidentally crossed the barrier between 2 very similar worlds, only to find himself trapped in a version of Earth where his home country was nothing but a cartographic error. Unlike many urban legends, the story of the Tord Man has proven incredibly difficult to trace back to a definitive source, which only adds to its enigmatic power. There are no known police reports from the Tokyo airport, no official government documents that corroborate the event. This has led many skeptics to dismiss it entirely as an elaborate piece of fiction, perhaps originating from a magazine story or a campfire tale that was later misremembered as fact. Yet, its persistence in popular culture is a testament to the deep chord it strikes. It taps into a fundamental anxiety about the stability of our own reality. How can we be certain that the world we wake up in tomorrow will be the same one we went to sleep in? The Tord Man is a phantom from a universe that is almost ours, but not quite. A living reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the borders on our maps might be far more fragile than we dare to believe. What makes the Tord Man incident so uniquely haunting is not just the stranger's sudden disappearance, but the chilling plausibility of his entire existence right up until the moment it collided with our reality. He wasn't a disoriented, incoherent figure rambling about fantastical lands. He was a professional, multilingual businessman with a suitcase full of meticulously detailed paperwork. The passport he carried wasn't a crude forgery or a childish prank. It was reportedly a sophisticated document, complete with stamps from previous international trips, all bearing the name of a nation that, to everyone else in the room, was a complete fiction. His bank statements and driver's license all pointed to a consistent, functioning life in a place called Tord. This level of detail suggests something far more complex than a simple case of mistaken identity or a fugitive on the run. A con artist might forge papers to get into a country, but they wouldn't invent an entire nation with a 1,000-year history and then express genuine confusion when no one had heard of it. His reaction was key. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone. He was utterly convinced of his own reality, and the growing bewilderment of the customs officials mirrored his own. This has led many theorists to propose that the man was a victim of what we might call a dimensional slip. Imagine our universe not as a singular, lonely existence, but as one page in an infinite book, the multiverse. Each page is a reality almost identical to our own, but with tiny or sometimes significant variations. On one of those pages, the rocky territory we know as Andorra is instead a nation called Tord. Perhaps in that world, a different treaty was signed centuries ago, or a different dynasty rose to power, leading to that sliver of land developing its own unique name and culture. According to this idea, the man wasn't a time traveler, but something even stranger, a dimensional traveler. He wasn't from our past or future, but from a world that is a near-perfect parallel to our own. For reasons we can't begin to understand, the barrier between his page and ours momentarily grew thin, and he accidentally stepped through, arriving at the Tokyo airport fully expecting it to be the Tokyo airport of his own world. His confusion at the map wasn't an act. It was the genuine shock of a man seeing his homeland inexplicably erased and renamed by a world that was supposed to be familiar. The manner of his vanishing only deepens the mystery. He was placed in a secure room on a high floor under guard, with his potentially reality-bending documents confiscated. The next morning, he was simply gone. This isn't the easy escape of a skilled operative. It's the inexplicable disappearance of someone who may never have been entirely of our world to begin with. Perhaps the conditions that allowed his crossover were temporary, and he was somehow snapped back to his point of origin, leaving the guards baffled and a hotel room empty. Or, in a more unsettling scenario, whatever force or entity was responsible for the error in the first place corrected it, retrieving him and erasing any trace, as if cleaning up a cosmic spill. This idea transforms the story from a simple mystery into a potential glimpse of the mechanics of a multiverse, a system that usually runs with perfect precision, but on this one occasion, in a Tokyo airport in 1954, experienced a catastrophic and visible glitch. Of course, the skeptical perspective offers more terrestrial, if still unusual, explanations. The most likely scenario is that the entire story is an urban legend, a piece of fiction that was mistakenly reported as fact and has since taken on a life of its own through repetition. Despite its popularity, no one has ever been able to locate a contemporary news report or an official government document from Japan that corroborates the event. It's possible the tale originated from a short story or was a piece of office folklore among airport staff that eventually leaked out. Another theory suggests the man could have been suffering from a severe and elaborate delusion, a rare psychological condition where a person constructs an entire fictional identity and history, complete with believable documentation they may have forged themselves in a dissociative state. While this doesn't easily explain his impossible escape, it at least grounds the story in a known, if rare, human experience. Yet, the enduring power of the Tord Man story lies in its perfect representation of a very modern anxiety. In our globalized world, our identity is increasingly tied to our documents, our passports, our licenses, our credit cards. They are the keys that unlock borders and prove we belong to a specific place and time. The Tord Man is the ultimate nightmare of this system, a man with all the right keys but for locks that don't exist in our world. He is a walking, talking error message in the system of reality. His story forces us to question the solidity of the world we take for granted. It asks us to consider that the maps we trust, the histories we learn, and the borders we defend might be entirely different just a whisper away, in a universe almost exactly like our own, where a man is trying to explain to a baffled official that he is from a country that, in his world, is as real as any other. But what if the key to unlocking time isn't a machine but a state of mind? For millennia, long before the concept of a time machine was ever sketched in a notebook, cultures around the world have been exploring the frontiers of time through the most advanced technology we possess, human consciousness. Shamans, mystics, and medicine men have long claimed the ability to traverse vast distances of time and space, not with hardware but through deep trances, potent plant brews, and intense meditation. These altered states of consciousness might represent humanity's oldest and most intimate form of temporal exploration, a psychic technology refined over thousands of years. Consider the intricate rituals of Amazonian shamans who guide their communities through ceremonies using ayahuasca, a powerful psychoactive brew often called the vine of the soul. The experience is rarely described as a simple hallucination. Participants consistently report profound journeys that feel hyper-real, where they access memories with impossible clarity, witness scenes from their ancestors' lives, or even perceive potential future events. It's as if the brew temporarily dissolves the cognitive filters that keep us anchored in the linear present, allowing the mind to drift along the broader river of time. A shaman might describe healing a person by journeying back to the root of a childhood trauma, or by venturing forward to see the path to wellness. This isn't metaphorical language to them. It's a literal report from a voyage undertaken in a non-ordinary state of reality. Similarly, various schools of meditation, from advanced Buddhist practices to the deep contemplative traditions of Christian mystics, aim to quiet the incessant chatter of the ego and the conscious mind. The ultimate goal in many of these traditions is to achieve a state of pure awareness, a point of consciousness that exists outside the relentless flow of past, present, and future. In this state of profound stillness, practitioners often describe a sensation of timelessness, of touching the eternal. Some report visions or insights that feel like direct downloads from another era, receiving knowledge or artistic inspiration that seems to arrive from outside themselves. The brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla, for instance, claimed he could voluntarily project his mind into this kind of state, visualizing his complex machines in perfect, working detail, and even running them mentally to test for flaws without ever building a physical prototype. This raises a fascinating and controversial question. Are these experiences merely elaborate, self-generated simulations within the brain, the ultimate virtual reality trip? Or could they be something more? Could the neurochemical changes induced by these practices, whether through plant medicine, breathwork, or deep meditation, actually alter our perception of time itself, acting as a kind of biochemical key that unlocks our innate but usually dormant ability to perceive time in its full, non-linear dimension. From a modern neuroscientific perspective, we know these practices dramatically change brainwave patterns, quieting the default mode network often associated with our sense of self and chronological narrative. In doing so, they might be temporarily disabling the very mental software that creates our illusion of linear time. Perhaps these mystics and shamans weren't just imagining their journeys. Perhaps they were pioneering a form of psychological time travel, developing techniques to consciously navigate the vast landscape of time that theoretical physics suggests already exists. In this view, the future isn't a blank page but a territory, and the past isn't gone but is a place that can be revisited. The chemical or meditative tools simply provide the vehicle for the consciousness to make the trip. This perspective doesn't diminish their experiences. It reframes them as a sophisticated, internalized technology for exploring the greatest mysteries of existence, suggesting that the secret to time travel might not be found in a lab, but within the incredible, untapped potential of our own awareness. Finally, we must ground these incredible stories in the realm of science, because the most astonishing revelation of all might be that time travel isn't a violation of the universe's rules, but a potential feature we simply haven't learned to use. For centuries, the idea of moving through time was pure fantasy, but then a young patent clerk in Switzerland redefined reality itself. Albert Einstein's theories of special and general relativity didn't just change physics, they opened a door that had been considered permanently locked. His equations revealed that time is not the rigid, universal constant we experience in our daily lives. Instead, it's a flexible dimension, intimately woven with the fabric of space itself into a single continuum, and it can be stretched, compressed, and warped. Special relativity introduced us to the concept of time dilation, a phenomenon that has been experimentally verified countless times. It tells us that the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time relative to a stationary observer. This isn't a theoretical abstraction, it's a measurable fact. Atomic clocks flown on airplanes tick ever so slightly slower than their synchronized counterparts on the ground. For astronauts on the International Space Station orbiting the Earth at over 17,000 miles per hour, time actually passes a tiny fraction slower than it does for us. Over a long mission, the difference adds up to measurable milliseconds. Now, imagine scaling that effect up. If you could build a spacecraft capable of traveling at a significant fraction of the speed of light, say 90%, the effect becomes dramatic. A journey that felt like 10 years to you on that ship could see 50 or 100 years pass back on Earth. You would have effectively traveled into the future, returning to a world generations ahead of your own. This is time travel sanctioned by the bedrock laws of physics. The only thing stopping us is the monumental engineering challenge of achieving such incredible speeds. General relativity took this mind-bending concept even further by describing how gravity also influences the flow of time. Einstein proposed that massive objects like planets and stars warp the space-time around them, creating a gravitational field. The stronger the gravity, the more time slows down. This means a clock at sea level closer to Earth's mass will tick slower than a clock on a mountaintop. Our GPS satellites have to account for this effect constantly. Their atomic clocks are programmed to correct for the fact that they are experiencing slightly less gravity in orbit, which makes them run faster than clocks on the ground. If they didn't, the entire system would become inaccurate within minutes. This principle offers another potential path for time travel. An object of immense density, like a neutron star, creates such intense gravity that time on its surface would crawl compared to the rest of the universe. And then there's the ultimate gravitational extreme, a black hole. At the edge of its event horizon, gravity is so powerful that time, from an outside perspective, would appear to stand still completely. Circling a black hole could, in theory, serve as a massive natural time machine, allowing you to witness the far future of the universe in what feels like a short trip. But traveling to the past is a far more complicated and contentious proposition. Here, physics gets much murkier, and we venture into the realm of theoretical constructs. The most famous of these is the idea of a wormhole, a concept first proposed by Einstein and his colleague Nathan Rosen. Often visualized as a tunnel or shortcut through the fabric of spacetime, a wormhole would connect two distant points or two different times instantly. If you could somehow create or find a stable, traversable wormhole, and then move one end of it at near light speed to exploit time dilation, you could create a scenario where the two ends are out of sync. Walking into one end might spit you out at the other end, not just in a different location, but in a different century. The monumental problems, however, are stability and scale. The wormholes permitted by general relativity are believed to be incredibly tiny, smaller than an atom, and they would snap shut in an instant. Keeping one open would require a form of matter with negative energy density, something we call exotic matter, which may not even exist or be possible to produce in the quantities needed. This is where the bizarre world of quantum physics enters the conversation, offering its own strange possibilities. At the subatomic level, the rules are very different. Quantum mechanics allows for particles to tunnel through energy barriers, exist in multiple states at once, and influence each other instantaneously across vast distances through quantum entanglement. Some interpretations, like the famous many worlds interpretation, suggest that every possible outcome of a quantum event actually occurs, spawning an infinite number of parallel universes. In this dizzying model, you wouldn't so much travel back in time as you would shift to a parallel reality where time is at a different point. This could provide a solution to the dreaded grandfather paradox, the logical conundrum of what happens if you go back in time and prevent your own grandfather from meeting your grandmother, thereby preventing your own birth. In the many worlds view, your actions would simply create a new, branching timeline where you were never born, while your original timeline remains untouched. Your journey wouldn't be a rewrite of history, but a jump to a new history. So, where does this leave us with all those historical claims we've explored? The science tells us that the universe is far stranger and more permissive than our everyday intuition allows. The laws of physics, as we currently understand them, do not expressly forbid time travel. They present us with potential pathways, even if they are currently far beyond our technological grasp. This scientific foundation transforms the stories of Rudolph Fentz, the Versailles time slip, and even the Philadelphia experiment from pure fantasy into something more intriguing, potential glimpses of phenomena we are just beginning to comprehend. Perhaps a natural wormhole briefly opened in Times Square, maybe a unique gravitational or electromagnetic anomaly around the Petit Trianon allowed the past to become perceptible. It's possible that severe storms, like the one Air Marshal Goddard flew through, can create temporary distortions in local spacetime. While we must always apply rigorous skepticism, the framework of modern physics allows us to ask these questions seriously. It suggests that the secret of time travel may not be a single, simple secret at all, but a complex tapestry of understood physics, theoretical possibilities, and natural anomalies we have yet to fully explain. The greatest mystery is no longer whether time is flexible, but how we might one day learn to navigate its currents. As we bring this journey to a close, it's worth reflecting on the extraordinary tapestry of stories we've explored together. From the vanished streets of 1950s New York to the storm-racked skies over Scotland, from the hallowed grounds of Versailles to the digital forums of the early internet, these accounts all share one common thread. They challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality itself. We've encountered respected academics, decorated military officers, and ordinary people who all claim to have experienced the impossible, their testimonies echoing across decades and sometimes centuries. While we may never have definitive proof for any single story, Their collective weight creates a compelling argument that our understanding of time remains profoundly incomplete. What makes these mysteries so enduring isn't necessarily their truth, but the profound questions they force us to ask about memory, perception, and the very nature of existence. They live in that fascinating gray area between fact and folklore, where even the most outlandish tale can contain a kernel of something inexplicable. The legend of Rudolph Fentz may have been debunked as fiction, yet it perfectly captures the emotional core of a time travel story: the disorientation, the tragedy, the sheer loneliness of being unstuck in time. The Versailles account, despite all rational explanations, continues to fascinate because it was documented by two serious, skeptical women who were forever changed by what they believed they witnessed. These stories persist because they speak to something deep within us, a universal curiosity about what lies beyond the horizon of our own moment. Perhaps the most exciting development is that science is beginning to catch up to our imagination. Where once time travel was the sole domain of mystics and science fiction writers, physicists now speak seriously about closed time-like curves, wormholes, and cosmic strings. The equations of general relativity don't forbid journeys through time. They simply show us how unimaginably difficult it would be to achieve. This scientific validation doesn't prove that any of the historical claims we've discussed are real, but it does transform time travel from a fantasy into a theoretical possibility, a problem of engineering and energy rather than a violation of natural law. It allows us to look at these old mysteries with fresh eyes, wondering if they might be glimpses of natural phenomena we are only now beginning to comprehend. So where does this leave us? These stories, whether ultimately proven to be hoaxes, misunderstandings, or genuine anomalies, serve a vital purpose. They keep the door of possibility open, encouraging us to question, to wonder, and to remain humble in the face of a universe that is far stranger than we can often admit. They remind us that history is not just a record of what we know, but a map of all we have yet to understand. The search for answers is what drives discovery, and sometimes the most important step is simply being willing to ask the question. I'd love to hear which of these stories resonated most with you. Do you find the Goddard incident compelling because of the witness's credibility, or does the humble charm of Håkon Nordqvist's tale speak to you? Share your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown.